Hi guys, Brad here. Welcome back to my channel. In this video I am going to quickly show you how to mount an orchid. Now I'm working with an orchid that is already half mounted to a piece of wood, and what I'm in the process of doing is I am just filling in a bunch of the new growth with moss under it. This orchid was just given to me and it had hardly any moss on it, and everything was completely bone dry. The orchid mount was actually so dry, even all the old roots are just dried up and don't look like they have much life in them. So I was just going to show you guys how I'm going to save this orchid mount. Now I want to use copious amounts of moss in here. The more moss you use, the easier it is going to be to maintain this orchid's health, because you're the one that's going to have to be watering it all the time. So if you can double up on the moss from what you think you should put on there, probably a good idea. And you can never have too much moss in there. So I'm just shoving it around. Now there's some loose pieces. Those are going to be going over top of the moss. And that's okay too. There we go. So cramming all the moss into all the cracks and crevices here of this orchid. Shove them down there. Okay, once all the moss is in place, you want to tie the fishing line at the bottom. I just use a 8-pound test line. You want to leave enough thread there, or enough line, that you can bind it again after. And all we are going to do is start slowly wrapping the orchid up. And this, I find, is easier actually. If you take a length of it, something like 5 feet worth or so, and cut it off from the spool. And I just carefully go in between all of the pseudobulbs here. With it not on the spool, it's much easier to fine-tune where you are placing the thread. And just keep going in between all the pseudobulbs. My goal is to do about 1 wrap every inch or so. Nothing has to be super tight. The new roots will all grow to the wood, and the fishing line is really just to keep it mounted temporarily. You can see I'm going through this, and I'm actually going to start cinching down some of the bulbs there. Now this is quite a big mount. Normally if you're working with just a little mount, maybe with an orchid that only has half a dozen leaves on, you're not going to have this problem of having to weave it in between all of the leaves. So that'll make it much simpler in most cases than what we have going on here. But why do anything simple, right? So we're going to just keep wrapping this up. Here's a loose one here, so I want to make sure this gets tucked in with the moss so it's all touching. And so really it's just to keep the moss and the orchid in place temporarily. And I'm going to finish that up, and then I'll show you the finished product. Okay, so I'm just finishing it up now. I have wrapped all the way up about every inch, and then when I got to the top I wrapped all the way back every inch. And so we're just getting back to the spot where we started. And if you remember, we started with leaving about 6 inches of the fishing line, and that was so I can find it now and tie it up with that. There we go. And there is the finished orchid now. It's got a lot more bark, or a lot more moss on it. All the bulbs have been strapped down, And it should be ready to go now. So that is a fairly simple way to mount an orchid. Just lay the bark, or lay the moss on the bark, lay the orchid down, or if the orchid's already in place like this one was, just tuck the moss just under the pseudobulb there, and then wrap it with fishing line. In this case I used 8-pound test. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.